The morning of my son's wedding, I ironed a shirt that never made it into a single photograph. I've thought about that a lot since. For most of my life, I believe the man only loses his place in a family through something loud. A blow-up. A door slammed hard enough to crack the frame. Something you could point to afterward and say, there, that's when it happened. Mine wasn't like that. Mine went quiet, one courteous little sentence at a time, until the morning somebody finally said the quiet part where I could hear it, and I understood that the chair had been pulled out from under me years before I ever felt myself hit the floor. Before I take you through it, and wherever you're listening from tonight, leave it down in the comments. I read every one of them. It keeps an old man company through a long Ontario winter. Let me bring you back to a kitchen in Peterborough and a kettle I couldn't be bothered to take off the burner. It was the second Saturday in September. I was 63 years old, standing at the ironing board in my undershirt with the radio low, pressing the collar of a gray dress shirt I'd bought special at the Marks out by the Lansdowne Street Plaza. My hands were a little unsteady. Not nerves. I want to be clear about that because later I'd hear people use that word for me, nervous, fragile, an old man not handling things well. It wasn't nerves. It was happiness, the kind that gets into your chest and shakes a bit because it doesn't have anywhere else to go. The boy I raised was getting married that afternoon at the golf club out on County Road 18, and I'd been looking forward to it the way you look forward to the first real snow. His name's Cole. I started calling him my son the year he turned 9. The first winter I drove him to 6 a.m. hockey practice at the Kinsman rink with the truck heater rattling in the windshield. Iced over and the boy asleep against the door with his bag of gear stinking up the cab. He wasn't mine by blood. I never once thought of him as anything other than mine. I met his mother, Lorraine, when he was 6. A small, serious kid who hid behind her hip at a chip truck by the lift locks and watched me like he was deciding whether I was worth the trouble. I spent the next 20 years trying to be worth the trouble. I heard Lorraine through the wall that morning. Our bedroom shared a wall with the upstairs landing, and she'd stepped out there to take a call, which she only ever did when she didn't want me in the room for it. I turned the iron off out of habit the way you do when you're trying to listen, and the house went still except for her voice, low and quick. "He'll understand," she was saying. "He always does. I'll put him with Donna and the kids. He won't make a production of it." A pause, the radio under my breath. "Then Cole wants his dad up there for the photos. Just let me handle it, all right? Wade's already on his way up from Oshawa." I stood there with the cooling iron in my hand. Wade. There was a name I'd spent 20 years hearing in fragments, the way you hear about weather that already came and went somewhere else. Cole's father, a man who'd been mostly a roomer, who showed up at Christmas every couple of years in whatever truck he was leasing that season, handed the kid a $100 bill and a story, and disappeared again before the wrapping paper hit the recycling. I set the iron down. I finished the collar. I put the shirt on and did up the buttons one at a time and looked at myself in the mirror over Lorraine's dresser. And the man looking back had the face of someone who'd just been handed a piece of news he'd already known for years and only now agreed to read. I didn't say anything to her. I wanted to see how far she'd carry it. That sounds cold, maybe. By that point in my life, I'd learned that the truest thing about a person is what they'll do when they think you aren't keeping track. Let me go back because you can't understand the seating chart without the 20 years that came before it. I bought my house in 1996, a solid little 2-story on a quiet street off Monaghan Road, before I ever met Lorraine. I'd worked at the GE plant on the Parkway since I was 19, and when that started winding down, I went out on my own doing renovations and small fabrication jobs, and I paid that mortgage off the slow, honest way, one payment at a time, through 2 recessions and a divorce I don't need to get into. My name on the deed, mine alone. My father, who came over from the old country with nothing, told me one thing before he passed that I never let go of. "Keep your name on what your own 2 hands built," he said. "Love doesn't need a title search to prove itself." I took that to heart, maybe too much, maybe not enough. You can decide. When Lorraine moved in with the boy, I didn't add her to anything. Not out of suspicion, I just heard my father's voice and left it alone, and she never once asked, and I took her not asking, as a kind of understanding. Looking back, I think it might have been patience. We never married. People always assume we did. 20 years, same roof, same Christmas card, but we stayed common law the whole way. That was her preference. Said it like a free spirit thing, said paper didn't change love, and I agreed because I agreed with her about most things in those days. I want you to hold on to that detail because it mattered more than either of us understood at the time. In this province, common law isn't the same as married. The law doesn't hand your partner half of what's in your name just because you shared a bed and a mailbox. I didn't know that yet. Neither did she. We'd both find out in a room with bad carpet. I raised Cole. There's no softer way to say it. I taught him to skate on the bay when the ice is thick enough, holding the back of his jacket while he windmilled his arms. I drove the rep team to tournaments in Lindsay and Cobourg and once all the way to Sault Ste. Marie in a snowstorm that had me white-knuckling the wheel on the Trans-Canada at 2 in the afternoon. I bought the skates, the sticks, the shoulder pads he grew out of every year, the rep fees that cost more than my first car. When he didn't take to school, I didn't make him feel like a disappointment. I got him into the millwright program at Fleming College and paid the tuition and bought his first set of tools, the good ones, Snap-on. Because a tradesman's tools are his pride and I wanted him to start with pride. I co-signed his truck loan at the credit union because his credit was thin and the manager knew me. I used F-150, decent shape. I covered the payments more than a few months when he was short. I never kept a ledger. That's not what a father does. That's what Lorraine always told me anyway, and she used that word a lot. Real father. Real dad. This is what real fathers do, Russ. I should have wondered all those years why she felt the need to keep saying real out loud like she was trying to convince one of us. Wade, the actual blood, never paid a dime of support, not one. I asked Lorraine about it exactly once, early on, and she waved her hand the way you'd shoo a wasp off a picnic table. That's between him and me, she said. You're the one who's here. And I was. For 20 years, I was the one who was here. 6 a.m. practices, parent-teacher nights, the bad flu when he was 11, and I slept in the chair beside his bed. I was the one who was here. And that, I'd learned, counts for exactly nothing in a province where the only thing that counts is whose name is on the paper and whose face the boy decides to claim in front of his new in-laws. The drive out to the golf club was quiet. Lorraine sat in the passenger seat of my truck, doing her lipstick in the visor mirror. Looking lovely, I'll give her that, and texting between coats. I watched the road. The maples along County Road 18 had just started to turn, that first edge of orange on the green, the kind of light that makes the whole county look like a promise it doesn't intend to keep. She put her phone down somewhere past the Buckhorn turnoff and said Cole was going to be so happy, and I said I knew, and I meant it. I did mean it. That's the part that still catches in my throat. The reception hall was warm and loud. Families packed at round tables. Kids in little vests already loosening their ties. I found the seating chart on a easel by the door. Beautiful calligraphy, and I ran my finger down it looking for my name. Head table, the bride and groom, the bride's parents, and then 2 names I had to read twice. Lorraine, Wade. Cole's mother and Cole's father, side by side at the head of the room. My name was at table 7, off near the kitchen doors, with Lorraine's sister Donna and her husband and their 2 squirming boys. I stood there a second longer than I should have. Then a young woman with a clipboard, the planner, touched my arm and asked if I was finding everything all right, and I said I was. And I walked to table 7 and sat down with my back to the kitchen and the flowers I'd brought for the bride still wrapped in their paper across my knees. I want to tell you I made a scene. I didn't. I've never been a scene-making man. I sat there and I watched the head table fill up. Lorraine in her new dress, and then Wade, tall, a leather jacket over his suit even though it was 70 degrees in there, gray coming in at the temples in a way that looked deliberate. He sat down beside Lorraine and leaned over and said something, and she laughed, her hand on his arm, and the two of them looked like a couple who'd been practicing this picture for a long time. Cole came over to my table once before the meal. He had Brooke with him, his bride, sweet girl, nervous smile, and he introduced me to her parents. "This is Russ," he said. "My mom's partner. He's been a huge help over the years." A huge help, like I'd lent him a ladder. Then he steered Brooke toward the head table, and I heard him say as they walked off, "You've got to meet my dad. He just got in from Oshawa." His dad, 2 words with a whole continent between them. Wade gave the father of the groom toast. He stood up with a glass of the good rye and told a story about teaching Cole to ride a bike that never happened, because I'm the one who ran behind that bike up and down Monaghan Road until my lungs gave out. And people laughed and dabbed their eyes, and somebody at table 4 called out, "That's a good dad right there," and I sat with my hands flat on the white tablecloth and didn't move. When the photographer gathered the family for pictures, the loud guy with the camera and the lanyard, he called for the groom's parents, and Lorraine and Wade stepped in on either side of Cole, and the flash went off, again and again, and nobody waved me over. And I understood that I had been edited out of a story I'd written every page of. I drove home alone. Lorraine texted me around 9 that they were all going for one more drink at the clubhouse bar. Just family, and I'd understand, wouldn't I? Just family. I sat in my own driveway under the one streetlight on Monaghan with the engine ticking as it cooled, and I read that word again. Family. I was not in it. I'd paid for the venue deposit on my visa 6 weeks before, and I was not in it. I went inside. The house was dark, and it had a stillness to it that felt almost polite, like it had already started practicing what it would be like once I was gone. I sat at the kitchen table in my chair, the one by the window where the light came in good in the mornings. The chair nobody ever officially gave me, but nobody ever took away. I put my phone face down on the table. I didn't throw it. I didn't swear at the ceiling. I sat there in the dark and let the hurt sink down through me and settle into something heavy and quiet, something that didn't need to shout to be the loudest thing in the room. I didn't sleep. I made coffee at 4 and drank it standing up because sitting at that table felt wrong now. And somewhere between the dark and the gray light coming up over the neighbor's garage, I made 3 decisions. By 8 o'clock the next morning, I'd started on the first. I called the credit union when they opened. I'd banked there for 30 years, back when it was the old branch on George Street with the one teller who knew everybody. I asked them to stop every pre-authorized transfer I had running. The payments I'd been quietly covering on Cole's truck, the transfer I sent toward Lorraine's SUV lease every month because the salon was always slow in winter. The line of credit I'd been steadily knocking down that somehow only ever seemed to fund her end of things. The fellow on the phone read the list back to me, a little careful, and asked, "All of them, sir." "Today," I said, and I asked to begin removing myself as co-signer on the truck loan at the earliest the agreement allowed. He said the primary borrower would have to be notified. "Go ahead," I told him. "Notify him." The second call was to a realtor named Sheila, a woman I'd known for years from the Legion fish fries, sharp and decent. I told her I wanted to list the house. She was quiet a second. "Russ," she said, "gentle, does Lorraine know about this?" "She's busy celebrating," I said. "I'll handle Lorraine." Sheila came by the next afternoon with her tape measure and her clipboard and walked every room, and she stopped in the kitchen by my chair in the morning window and asked the same question again. More careful this time, and I gave her the same answer. And she nodded and said she could have it listed by the weekend. I told her to list it. The third decision I kept to myself for a while, but I'll tell you now, I decided that whatever was left of me at the end of all this, I was taking it up to the lake. Lorraine came home Sunday evening still glowing, full of the reception, how beautiful Brooke had looked, how Cole had teared up during Wade's toast, how lovely it all was. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't notice the filing cabinet in the spare room hanging open or me at the kitchen table with 20 years of canceled checks and bank statements spread out in front of me like a hand of cards I had finally decided to play. "You're quiet," she said, on her way up to bed. "Long weekend," I told her. She kissed the top of my head and went up, and I sat there until past midnight going through every receipt, every transfer, every payment. The numbers told a story nobody had ever once asked to hear, and I made myself read all of it. The house sold in 11 days. A young couple from down in Whitby, Scott and Melanie, he worked at the lab in town, and she was expecting in the spring, pre-approved. Ready to close fast, looking for exactly that kind of quiet street to raise a kid on. Sheila called me with the offer, $5,000 under asking. I thought about my chair by the window and the spot I'd taken at that table for 20 years without anyone telling me to, and the spot I'd been moved out of at a different table without anyone bothering to ask. "Tell them yes," I said. I signed the papers on a Thursday at a lawyer's office on Water Street. My hand was steady right up until the last page, where it wasn't for just a second. Then it was done. I packed the truck over 3 nights, only the things that were mine and mattered, my tools. My father's watch, the cedar strip canoe I'd built one winter in the garage, a box of records older than the relationship. I left everything else exactly the way Lorraine had arranged it. Every cushion, every framed photo of a family I'd apparently only ever been a contractor to. I drove it all up Highway 28 to the cottage I'd built with my own hands on Stony Lake, board by board over 15 summers, the one place in this world that had always been only and entirely mine. And I started turning it from a place you visit in July into a place a man could actually live through a Coworth winter. Lorraine found out on a Saturday. Sheila texted me at 2047 in the afternoon. "She's at the house." New owners answered the door. "It's getting loud." I was sitting at the chip truck by the dam in Lakefield with a coffee, watching the water come over the spillway, and I put the phone down and finished the coffee slow. I imagined her on that porch. I imagined her face. I'll tell you the truth, because there's no point in this story if I don't. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel guilty either. I felt the way the lake feels after the wind dies. "Just clear." She called 14 times that afternoon. I answered on the 15th. Her voice came through cracked and furious. "Russ, what did you do? Where's my house?" "It was my house," I said. "You only ever lived in it." She came at me with everything. Lawyers, how could I? How she'd given me the best years of her life. I let her go for a while, and then I said, "You didn't give me your best years, Lorraine. You billed me for them. There's a difference." She hung up. Cole called 20 minutes later. His voice was nothing like his mother's, lower, tighter, like he was holding something he was afraid would break. "Why," he said, "just the one word. Ask your mother," I told him. "Ask her who sat by the kitchen at your wedding while a man who never paid $1 gave the dad toast. Ask her who covered your truck for the last 3 years. Then ask yourself which one of us you walked your bride over to introduce." He didn't say anything for a long moment. I could hear Lorraine in the background, sharp and going. "I didn't think you'd actually," he started. "That's the whole problem, Cole," I said. "Nobody ever thought I would." The line went quiet, and then it went dead. Lorraine did get a lawyer. We ended up in a mediation room in a low brick building off Charlotte Street, the kind of room with industrial carpet and a water cooler that gurgles at the worst moments. She came in first, a young lawyer beside her with a briefcase that still had the tag scuff on the handle. Cole came in behind her, eyes down. And behind Cole, leaning against the back wall with his arms crossed like he had a ticket to somebody else's car accident, was Wade. The mediator was a woman in her late 50s, reading glasses on a chain, the patient voice of somebody who'd watched a lot of families take each other apart over a kitchen table's worth of memories. Lorraine's lawyer started in right away. 20-year relationship, joint family venture, unjust enrichment. He had the words, I'll give him that, the ones that come up when a common law partner wants a share of what isn't in their name. He talked about everything she'd contributed to the household, the home she'd made, the years she'd given. When the mediator turned to me, I stood up and set a manila envelope on the table. It landed soft. The house, I said, was bought in 1996 before I ever met her in my name, and it stayed in my name for 30 years. Here's the deed and the discharged mortgage. And here's the deed and the discharged mortgage. And here's the rest. I slid the second stack forward, 20 years of what I put in. The tuition, the tools, the truck, the lease transfers, the line of credit she drew on, every check, every statement, every transfer, all of it. If we're talking about who enriched who in this relationship, I said, the numbers run one direction, and it isn't hers. The mediator read it all. She didn't rush. Lorraine's lawyer reached for the documents, and she got there first. After a while, she looked at the young man over her glasses and said mildly that a claim for a share of a property held solely in one partner's name, bought before the relationship, with a paper trail like this one, was not a claim she'd want to take in front of a judge, and that common law status in this province did not transfer ownership the way her client seemed to believe it did. Lorraine leaned forward and said money was never what this was about, Russ. It was, I told her, when it was mine. That was when Wade pushed off the wall. I'm his father, he said, pointing at Cole. He grew up in that house. I turned and looked at him for the first time. Really looked. Same leather jacket. Same easy grin that had cost him nothing his whole life. Did you ever pay $1 of support? I asked him. The grin came off. Because I've got receipts for every gap you left, I said. 20 years of gaps. Hockey, tuition, tools, a truck. The boy looked up at that, and his eyes were wet, but there was something else in them too. The same look he'd had in grade 5 when long division finally clicked. Not happy, just awake. The mediator closed the file. There's no legal basis to undo the sale, she said. We're done. 3 weeks later, Wade stopped answering Cole's calls. I heard it secondhand, the way I had heard everything about that man for 20 years. He borrowed a few $1,000s off Cole for a snowmobile, gotten his weekend of looking like a dad at a wedding, and gone back down the 115 to Oshawa and the next version of his life, same as he'd always done. I didn't feel a thing about it. I'd known how that story ended before the man ever sat down at that head table. I started going to the Legion on Thursday nights that fall. There's an old fellow there named Cliff, 84, hands like worn leather, a peacekeeper in Cyprus a lifetime ago, eyes that don't miss much. He sits at the end of the bar and nurses one blue all night. One Thursday he looked at me sideways and said, "You've got that look." What look? I asked. Like a man who finally put down something heavy and can't figure out what to do with his hands now. I laughed, the first real one in weeks. Then he surprised me. I raised 2 boys that weren't mine, Cliff said. Married their mother in 71. They called me Dad till the day they buried me, near enough. Pointing his bottle at me, he said, "Not every story like yours ends with you in the back of the room, son. Some of us got the seat. You just drew the wrong woman to share a deed with, and you fixed it. The hands'll find something. They always do." Cole texted me in December. One line. "Can we talk?" I looked at it a long time. I thought about a 6-year-old hiding behind his mother's hip at a chip truck, deciding whether I was worth the trouble. "When you're ready to listen to," I wrote back. We met at a diner in Lakefield, a neutral ground, snow coming down soft past the window. He looked older, tired, or maybe just honest for the first time. He told me Wade was gone again. No surprise to either of us. "I'm not here about the house," he said. "I'm here because I let them put you by the kitchen, and I knew it was wrong, and I didn't say a single word." That one landed right behind the ribs, in the place the old hurt used to live. An apology doesn't undo it, I told him, but it's a place to start. We finished our coffee. He hugged me on the sidewalk outside, awkward and quick, 2 men learning how to stand in the same room again. It wasn't a happy ending. It was an honest one. I can live with honest. These days I'm up at the lake year-round. I winterize the place myself, foam in a good wood stove, and the cold doesn't bother me the way I thought it would. I bring a thermos out to the dock most mornings and watch Stony Lake wake up gray and unhurried, the ice creeping out a little further from the shore each week. Cliff was right about the hands. I've started building Muskoka chairs in the workshop off the back cedar, nothing fancy, and I give them away to the folks around the lake. The Hendersons 2 docks over, the young couple in the green cottage. It isn't much, it's mine. Some nights I still think about that chair by the kitchen window, the one I used to push in quiet after every supper, careful not to take up too much room, like making myself smaller would somehow earn me the right to stay. I don't do that anymore. Here's what it took me 20 years and one wedding to finally understand. A roof you hold up alone isn't a home. It's a job nobody's paying you for. And when people tell you you're family right up until somebody shinier walks through the door, believe the seating chart, not the speech. So if you've ever been the one paying the bills while another man took the photographs, if you've ever found yourself moved to the back of your own life by people who smiled while they did it, I hope an old man at a lake can tell you one thing. You don't have to slam a door to walk through it. You don't have to raise your voice to be done. Sometimes you just stop shoveling a path to a door that was only ever locked from the inside, and you let the snow have it, and you go find a chair that no one alive can move you out of. I built mine myself. I'm sitting in it right now. The chair I built for myself doesn't wobble. I notice that every morning when I sit down on the dock with my coffee, the cedar's still and solid under me, and I think about how long I spent making myself smaller in a chair somebody could move whenever it suited them. Here's a thing I had to learn the slow way, and I'll lay it out plain because nobody laid it out for me. Nothing that happened to me was an accident. Lorraine didn't wake up cruel one morning. She found early on that I'd carry whatever she handed me without a word, and people will keep stacking weight on a man who never sets it down. I taught her I'd cover the truck, the lease, the line of credit, and then I acted surprised when she treated me like the thing that pays. Wade didn't steal my place at that wedding. I'd left it propped open for 20 years by never once asking to have my name said out loud. Cole walked his bride over to the man in the leather jacket because that's the story he'd been handed his whole life, and I'd been too gentle or too proud to correct it. Every bit of it came from a seed somebody planted, mine included. That's not me blaming myself. That's me finally understanding that what you allow, you teach. So when people ask me what I'd tell a younger man standing at an ironing board, hearing his life through a wall, I tell him 3 things, and they're not complicated. Do the right thing even when nobody's clapping. Because being decent for 20 years was not my mistake. Raising Cole was the best work of my life, and I'd do it again tomorrow. The decency was never the problem. The problem was I stopped using my head. So use your head. See what's in front of you. Read the seating chart. Look at whose name is on the deed. Notice the word a person reaches for over and over, the way I should have noticed Lorraine saying real father like she was talking herself into it. Love freely, but keep your eyes open while you do it. And when the day comes that you finally see it clear, find the spine to act, quietly, all the way through, without slamming a single door. Knowing the truth and doing nothing about it is just a longer way of staying in the back row. I'm not bitter about Stony Lake. I want to be honest about that. I lost a house and a woman and most of what I thought a family was, and what I got back was a morning that's mine. A kid who finally calls me on his own in a chair nobody alive can move me out of. That's not a sad ending. A man who's kind, who's clear-eyed, and who can finally do the hard, quiet thing when it's time, that man doesn't lose. He just stops paying for a seat he already owned. I built mine board by board. Come spring, I'm building one for Cole, too.